You're listening to Factual America. I think what your film does is brings us back to the essence of his greatness and who he was. And I think this thing about the poet and storyteller, I mean, maybe you can say even more about that, because I think you've got archive of McCartney, I think, on there, and others just saying how he could just boil tell a whole story in less than 3 minutes.
Mm. Well, he definitely was a storyteller, that's for sure, and he definitely was a poet. The situation is that I personally think, and there are various views of his life that became detrimental to his ongoing performing and his relationship with how to deal with them. See, when I started in the industry, there were no parameters.
Yeah.
And we were pioneers. We created those parameters. And, publishing is very important today. And it was very unimportant in those days. But, he was responsible for bringing the cycle in of what we know as rock and roll in music today. It was 3 chords. He played the guitar beautifully, wonderfully. Beautifully is not the word. He played it wonderfully. And it was related to the songs that he really created that were so important to the Beatles, so important to the Rolling Stones. A lot of the English acts that came over to perform in America that we know of, The Who and Alvin Lee 10 years after, all of these acts basically learned from Chuck Berry, and they adapted their way of playing his songs.
And they would make they would set a path straight for Chicago and Chess Records, wouldn't they? I mean, a lot of them, as in a way of sort of paying homage.
That's a little bit of a little bit too easy to basically agree with that.
Really?
A lot of those would be listening, and it always happens through ports. And ports basically, as you probably well know, the Beatles used to go down, Ringo used to go down, Paul McCartney, John Lennon used to go down to the docks. And as the big ships came in, they'd bring them American jukebox, second-hand records, and they'd swap them. And before you knew what happened, is that became the format of their band, of which they were going forward, and they wrote songs based around what they heard. And it became related to those places you just suggested. Yes, the Stones did go over and record thinking they were going to pick up the sounds that they had developed their music around. You also looked at the back of a Stones album and everything was, bury this, bury that, bury this, bury that. Who'd written all these songs?
Yeah.
The Beatles were the same in a way, although not as much. But The Who, everybody that was starting out of that period of time was saying, if he can do it, we can do it. But they didn't really do it as well in certain ways. But you can hear Chuck in their way they performed. And of course, you've got to understand that he was a real writer.
Yeah.
A real writer.